Hello Snorfs, it's me again. I promised you all that I'd be making a DBD FNaF Concept video, and here it is. 5 months later. I'm sorry, okay, I've been busy not working on the game I'm supposed to be working on, spending nights trying to get my stupid done C++ code to work with my classes. But now that I have this sudden unexplainable burst of inspiration, I'm ready to share my concept with you all. So after all this time, here it is. To preface, this concept won't be as rigid as most concepts you've probably seen. For things like killer powers, perks, and potential character lore, I only have one idea to offer since designing things like that takes time, and that is the meat of these bones after all. But for things like map offerings, potential realms, or the killer's weapon, I'll throw out a few ideas just to, I don't know, spread ideas or something. Anyways, I should also note that I'll try to put visuals on screen when relevant, but this video will be nowhere near as edited as my old stuff was, so enjoy some DBD gameplay as B-roll, or you could just listen to this like a podcast. I also want to mention this concept might cover more than you're actually interested in hearing my thoughts on, so I put timestamps in the description so you can skip to the parts you're actually interested in seeing. So let's start with the survivors. I know plenty of people are expecting there to not be a survivor for this chapter since historically, FNaF hasn't really shown humans in the games outside of the stylized formats like pixel art or whatever you want to call the style of Security Breach. But with such a big license, I'm confident to say that we'll get at least one. In fact, I'm going to go as far as to say that we'll get two, much like the other big license in this game's history, Resident Evil. One of these survivors serves narrative purpose, and the other serves iconic purpose. And these survivors would be Michael Afton and Vanessa from Security Breach. Also note, you might see in some of the visuals in this concept that I call Vanessa Afton. We know her last name starts with A, and that's good enough for me. If that bothers you, just ignore it. Anyways, narratively, Michael would be important to have as, surprise to no one, I'm choosing Springtrap as the killer for this chapter. But we'll get to old Willy Boy later. Vanessa I chose on the account that A, I've been advocating for her since day one, and 2, Security Breach, despite the mixed opinions on it, is probably one of the most iconic FNaF games now, probably right next to the original game. I've met plenty of people who claim to first get into FNaF because of Security Breach. Plus the number of memes and TikTok audios and whatnot from Security Breach was relatively high, so even for people outside the FNaF community, Security Breach is somewhat well known, and Vanessa would be generally known by people because of a...
Freddy! You're supposed to be on lockdown!
Vanessa, I'm a material girl.
Anyways, I want to specify that I feel this chapter would be best representative of the series if it focuses on the games and not the movie. So while I could see Josh Hutcherson and Elizabeth Whale's likenesses being used to represent these characters, since they've never had official realistic human designs otherwise, I think narratively they should be the characters from the games. Let's start with general expectations of their lore. As a whole, I know Scott tends to be pretty reserved when it comes to sharing lore, especially in another party's product, so I can see a world where their in-game lore is around all the same lines as Leon's or Pinhead's. But I can also see a possibility where there will be a little more, just nothing too revealing for the FNaF lore. I think Michael's story will first summarize the events of Sister Location, as that's the first game timeline-wise that, to my knowledge, has been 100% confirmed that we're playing as Michael Afton, with the custom night cutscene. Maybe the lore will give a bit of depth to his thoughts throughout, but I think the general summary will do. After getting scooped, there will be a section in the lore involving his revelation that somehow he still lives. From there, there would be a time jump to Michael discovering the pizzeria simulator location, and its backstory will end with the flames closing in on him, the heat of the fire and the darkness of the smoke turning into cold black fog as Michael feels whole again, but in a new place. Vanessa's lore, I feel, would involve Security Breach. Maybe it would mention her getting hired as head of security as mentioned in one of the security breach logs, but overall I could see this being another summary, this time for a security breach. It would generally involve her stressing over Gregory being loose on the Pizzaplex, fading in and out of her Vanny persona. During her search, she eventually decides to descend into the deeper parts of the building before getting overtaken by another dark force, an unfamiliar one. A black fog that swallows her, spitting her back out in an unfamiliar, horrifying landscape. So let's get on to perks. Bear in mind, I'm no master balancer, nor do I know every perk in the game by heart. So if any of these are too much like an already existing perk or seem broken, I apologize. For Michael, I think his perk should reference his time walking around as a lifeless husk, determination to wrap up loose ends, and also the general security guard vibe of the early FNaF games. The first perk I've come up with is called Deathless Resolve. Even caught between life and death, you do all you can to help. While you're in the dying state, this perk activates. Gain the abilities to heal other survivors in the dying state, cleanse totems, and sabotage hooks. These interaction speeds are reduced by 50, 40, 30%. Gain the ability to use flashlights, and you leave no trails of blood. Overall, this perk is meant to represent how, even after being scooped, Michael lived on with the sole purpose of foiling his father's legacy. In this case, even while in the dying state, we'll be able to foil the killer's plans with on-the-ground flashlight saves or sabotages or by picking up other downed survivors. As such, it also acts as a somewhat niche anti-slugging perk with the healing capability. The next perk is Ultimatum. Given time, you'll wrap up every loose end. Once all generators are completed, pallets, windows, breakable walls, totems, chests, and hooks are all revealed to you within a 32, 48, 64 meter range. Scorch hooks are shown in yellow. As stated, this perk is a reference to Michael's determination of helping with the destruction of his father and his entire legacy. Like most endgame perks, this perk would probably be relatively niche. Its main utility would be to have more information during chases in the endgame, essentially getting a larger range of windows of opportunity. But secondarily, it would help find any remaining hexes like Noed, or simply help you get challenges done, like cleanse 15 totem challenges. I do acknowledge this is a lot of aura reading at once, but I feel for the end game only, it's fair enough. Mike's last perk is Enervating Glare. Light alone can't stop the horrors, but it may delay it. While you're holding a flashlight, this perk activates. You can no longer blind killers with flashlights. Instead, when shining a flashlight on the eyes of a killer, the duration of their pallet stuns, bolts, and break actions are increased by 50%. Additionally, the killer is hindered by 5, 10, 15%. This perk is mostly just a reference to the general gameplay elements of FNaF in which the animatronics get stunned or repelled by flashlight usage, like Foxy in FNaF 2 or the Scraps and Pizzeria Simulator. I also just generally thought it would be interesting to have a flashlight perk not relying on blinds like all current flashlight perks. But as a whole, I find it interesting to have more uses for flashlights than just as weapons. You'll see this with Vanessa's perks as well. Speaking of, Vanessa's perks are up next. For hers, I based them off her status as a night guard, her history of having to resist dark forces, namely the influence of Glitch Trap, and her general ferocity throughout security breach. The first perk is Guided Search. When you need to find something a little light couldn't hurt. While you're holding a flashlight, this perk activates. You can no longer blind killers with flashlights. Instead, while shining a flashlight, its battery consumption is reduced by 60, 70, 80%, and you see the auras of exit gate switches, generators, chests, totems, and the hatch within a 24 meter range. This perk is obviously just a reference to how Vanessa spent security breach looking for Gregory, obviously with the flashlight, and again, it's just another one of my attempts to make flashlights more interesting. I can see that it may be a little too close to the perk Clairvoyance though, but since it has a much lesser range than Clairvoyance, with a slightly longer duration with the flashlight duration, it might be interesting if it also shows those auras to other survivors. I don't know that. Her second perk is Dark Resistance. You're all too familiar with resisting sinister forces. You can interact with the exit gate switches, generators, chests, pallets, and totems blocked by the entity. When you do so, the entity stops blocking that object and you become exhausted for 60, 50, 40 seconds. When you stop interacting with the given object, it returns to being blocked for the remaining duration would have been blocked otherwise. Dark resistance cannot be used while exhausted. You do not recover from the exhausted steps while running. Exhausted prevents survivors from activating exhaustion perks. The resistance of the influence of Glitch Trap is, or at least it's supposed to be, a big part of Vanessa's character. This is also kind of part of movie Vanessa with resisting William's demands, but this is especially seen in her therapy tapes in Security Breach. As such, a perk where she can resist the entity makes thematic sense. While on one hand this perk could absolutely annihilate perks like No Way Out or Corrupt Intervention, it would also be totally useless in matches where the killer has no entity blocking abilities. Vanessa's third perk is Irritation. The more stress you're put under, the harsher you lash out. Each time you're hooked, gain a token to a maximum of 2 tokens. For each token, the duration the killer is stunned when you stun them by any means is increased by 30, 40, 50%. This perk is meant to represent Vanessa's general characterization throughout Security Breach, and the state that she is unbelievably and increasingly frustrated at being unable to catch Gregory, and representative of her more aggressive actions like shoving Mask Bat out of the way, or White Woman jump scare. And for context, normally pallet stuns are 2 seconds, so with the maximum tier version of the perk, your pallet stuns would last for 3 seconds when hooked once, and 4 seconds when on death hook. Now to briefly summarize some possible cosmetics, I think the base skin of Mike would be him in his purple shirt and jeans as shown in the sister location cutscenes, and the base skin of Vanessa would be her Security Breach outfit. Maybe each of them could get skins referencing their movie counterparts. Mike could get a security guard outfit and Vanessa could get an outfit referencing the Freedom ending of Security Breach. Also, I think they would have cool looking holiday sweaters, so here's the design I made for Vanessa's a while back. I didn't have time to do one for Mike, but I assume it would be around the similar lines, but with the classic characters instead of the Pizzaplex characters. So with the survivors covered, let's move on to the killer. I know FNaF has plenty of cool monsters that could work as killers, but I think most people would agree that none of them are more fit to be the killer to represent FNaF than William Afton himself in the form of Springtrap. Springtrap would have a basic 32 meter tear radius, would be tall, and would have a 4.6 meters second movement speed. It is a point of discussion though what his in-game alias would be. The most popular one I've seen is The Attraction. It was used in Rareth Lynx's concept videos, and ever I see another name suggested, there's someone in the replies who said something around the lines of, that name would work, but I think The Attraction would fit best. And I gotta be real, I don't hate this name. I also don't super get why it's so popular. Specifically, I feel that the pseudonym really only describes William well in the context of FNaF 3, in which, yes, he is meant to be the attraction of Fazbear Frights, but that's for like a week. In the context of the full story, Springtrap is so much more than that. So again, I definitely don't hate the name, but I also think other ideas would work. It could be really on the nose with lore stuff and call him the Remnant, referencing the literal remnants of William in the Spring Bunny suit which composed Springtrap, and of course paying homage to the most infamous element of FNaF lore. But honestly, I think the simple name of the animatronic works. If FNaF is known for anything, it's animatronics, and I bet plenty of people watching this learn the word animatronic from FNaF. But really, from a lore perspective, this would be a reference to the fact that, at least in the novel trilogy, William is on a level of insanity where he describes himself as one of them in reference to the animatronics. But really, whatever name works. I'm not uninstalling DBD even if they name him something like the dude in the rabbit suit. That aside, let's cover the interesting part, Springtrap's killer power. For licensed killers, there are a few things that need to be done to make the killer feel like themselves. Some obvious things are utilizing objects and imagery related to the source material, but I think above all else, I think it's important for a licensed killer's power to carry the same thematic feel as their source material. A good example of this is Chucky, who, in the movies, causes panic, hysteria, is known to be hiding anywhere at any time. His power not only lets him go undetectable, but for survivors shows illusory footsteps everywhere, making survivors panic whether the steps are just in their head, or if Chucky has actually come to kill them. In FNaF's case, I think the most significant horror theme of the franchise is claustrophobia, both relating to physical constraints within small offices or desks within animatronic suits, and also more emotional claustrophobia, as a way to put it. In this case, I mostly mean people who in one way or another have become trapped emotionally in some way, like Henry and Michael dedicating their later years of their lives for nothing more than ending the horrors William caused, or Vanessa being stuck with the glitch trap in her head. In terms of iconography, it's also worth calling out jump scares, monitoring, and animatronics as key elements of FNaF. I mean, you could best summarize the gameplay of the original games of keeping animatronics from jump scaring you while you work as a night guard. So with those elements in mind, here's my suggestion for the killer power. It's a little complex, but if nothing else, it is about the length, if not shorter, than the alien's power. But this killer power I call Bound in Agony. His legacy is a path paved with agony, where consequences of his murders live on, twisted into horrors of their own. If only he had been monitored as closely back then as he must be now. Special ability Jump Scare. Press the power button to charge a jump scare. Once ready, press the attack button to unleash a loud scream. Survivors within 8 meters scream and become tethered to the point the jump scare occurred at by tendrils of agony. Tethered survivors cannot move beyond 8 meters of the tendril's origin point. The tendrils last for 15 seconds and decay 30% faster while a survivor is utilizing a security station. If a tethered survivor is injured, the tendril connected to them breaks. If a tethered survivor is put into the dying state, they are sent to an animatronic suit. Special map feature security stations. 7 security stations are scattered across the map. Survivors can interact with these stations to see the auras of animatronic suits and Springtrap. Once the camera station is used for 10 seconds, it then must recharge. Special map feature animatronics. While inside of animatronic suits, survivors are unable to make out their surroundings and can be sacrificed as if they are on a hook. Survivors in suits have their auras hidden. Special ability Night Shift. The night shift meter builds whenever a survivor is inside of an animatronic suit, feeling faster for each survivor inside of the suit. During night shift, Springtrap becomes undetectable and up to 2 anti-animatronic suits will stand up and begin patrolling the trial, alerting the killer of any spotted survivors' locations with killer instinct. So to elaborate on this power design, I'll explain each ability one by one. First, jump scares obviously to tie FNaF's iconic jump scares into Springtrap's power. However, I'm sure the idea of tethers of agony may have raised some eyebrows, so let me explain. As stated thematically, loved ones of William's victims became consumed and trapped by their own grief. The most obvious example would be how Henry became hellbent on ending William once Charlie died, and was unable to move on, and how Susie's family seems to have trouble moving on in the Fazbear Fright story Coming Home. These tendrils of agony, as I call them, are meant to be a physical manifestation of these emotions in the entity's realm, the agony of Afton's wrongdoings physically binding survivors within the area that the jump scare scream occurred in. Mechanically, this is meant to be the main chase power, but I wanted to make something helpful without completely disabling survivors' options. I chose 8 meters specifically as that's roughly the radius needed for survivors to still be able to loop around the killer shack, while also keeping them from moving on from it. Plenty of chase powers in the game, such as Dr. Shock, are known as anti-loop, and can be pretty unfun for the survivors, as they often just take away their options. So this was designed to keep survivors' ability to proper loop and navigate tiles, while also limiting their ability to move between tiles, giving Springtrap an upper hand in chases. Strategically, you could try using a jump scare once a survivor has utilized the resources of a loop, to trap them in it, and they just have to do what they can with what remains. As far as I can tell, a chase power that doesn't shut down loops, but does shut down traversal between tiles, something we haven't really seen yet. Visually, these tendrils would probably match the description of agony in the books, being a deep black inky substance. The tendrils all converging on the point Springtrap was at when he used the jump scare. For clarity, I think there should also be a black ring around the tendril's radius, so it's more clear to the survivor where their bounds are. Additionally, so the survivors don't get stuck floating in the air or anything weird, I think that while the lateral position of the tendril's origin should be fixed to the jump scare point, the elevation should be variable depending on the survivor's elevation. For example, if you get tethered on the second floor of RPD and then drop down to the first floor, you won't get stuck floating in the air and will still be able to navigate around the same radius. When a survivor is downed while tethered, I imagine the agony would draw them in, literally consuming them, before they get transported into one of the animatronic suits. Kind of how already a survivor just gets teleported to Pyramid Head cages. The main difference is the animatronics would already be there while the cages also spawn in with the teleported survivor. Next for camera stations, I wanted to include FNAF's most iconic mechanic, but DBD-ify it. While I think an actual camera interface would be cool, I also feel that wouldn't really feel right for DBD, and would also likely mean that you won't have any chance to watch your surroundings while you're looking at it. So I settled for aura reading. For clarity, the auras of animatronics would be revealed when stationary and also when moving around during the night shift mode. Since their silhouettes may be hard to decipher from far away, especially when they're like slumped over, I think each of them should be color-coded, so like Foxy would be red, Bonnie would be blue, Chica would be yellow, etc. And these colors would match whatever the stuffed icons are on the HUD. But maybe for accessibility, in addition to the suit auras being different colors, maybe the auras should have different patterns for colorblind individuals in the event the animatronic silhouettes aren't clear from a distance. The cameras also cause tendrils of agony to decay faster as a means to give them more functionality beyond just information. I mean, if you happen to stumble upon all of the animatronic suits before anyone gets stuffed, there'd be no big reason to use the cameras other than seeing where the killer is. This also gives the feeling of being a proper security guard, as your overwatch of the trial helps those in chase escape faster. But of course, this would mean you wouldn't be on a generator as you're helping people in chase from afar. Finally, the cameras, just like in FNAF, I thought should have limited use, which is why they recharge. The animatronics come from the fact that I feel one of the most iconic elements of Williams' murders is his choice of using the suits as a means to hide their bodies. As such, I thought he should be able to use the animatronics as special hooks. The reason the stuffed survivor's vision is limited is to keep things fair between solo queue and survive with friends survivors. Without it, survive with friends survivors could call out their location and there'd be no need to use the cameras at all. In terms of roaming animatronics, I think 2 at a time is best, given that's how many zombies Nemesis gets, and I'm not sure if any more would break the game, and I don't mean balance-wise, I mean performance-wise. I also wouldn't want them to do too much other than have decent information abilities, on the account that I already think the power is decent enough as it is, and lore-wise, the animatronics aren't supposed to be malicious, just manipulated. And to be clear, the AI of the animatronics would be much more alert than Nemesis' zombies, always navigating towards the nearest survivor no matter their distance. Finally, the undetectable during night shift is meant to be a means of emulating Springtrap's sneakiness in FNAF 3. And finally, night shift. As a whole, I just think power build-up abilities are cool, and atmospherically I think this could be great for Dead by Daylight. I can imagine spooky ambience similar to Dredge's Nightfall, in which maybe you hear sounds of children laughing or crying, as the edges of your screen drip black, almost like drops of agony. All while at any time one of the animatronics could spot you and lead to your capture. Just to be clear though, things wouldn't get any darker, as at that point I'd just be shamelessly copying the Dredge's power. So that's the power explained. Again, I know it may be a lot, but I hope I described it clearly enough. I also designed some add-ons for this power, which I'll display on screen now for the sake of time. The only add-on I want to specifically call out is the add-on that adds an extra animatronic suit, Golden Freddy, to the trial. This suit always spawns in the basement. I don't know, I just think going to the basement and seeing Golden Freddy laying there would be horrifying. My only note is I could see them realistically making all of the add-ons items around Fats or Frights in FNAF 3, especially the items involved with the secret minigames, like the Balloon Boy drawing. I mostly say this as, for example, Pyramid Head's add-ons are all items/objects found in Silent Hill 2, roughly, and all of Dracula's items come from Symphony of the Night, the game that DBD draws most for the Castlevania chapter. I, however, wanted a fairly even spread of references to different FNAF games, which is why there's FNAF 1 stuff, Security Breach stuff, etc. For Springtrap's Mori, I feel like it has to involve a spring lock failure in some way. Spring lock failures, in my opinion, have got to be the most iconic and gruesome form of death in the FNaF lore, and I imagine it would involve the entity summoning a suit to Springtrap's position, at which point he forces the survivor into it and then rips the suit, setting the spring locks off like we see in the FNaF movie. Alright, now with that covered, let's dig into Springtrap's perks. I think narratively, these perks should refer to William's unassuming nature of being a killer, especially at Spring Bonnie, his general nature of luring in the gullible to get his kills, and his sneakiness of disposing of his victims' bodies. I was also considering paying homage to his undying nature, but Freddy Krueger's perks already kind of fill that narrative niche, and I want to try something new. The first perk is unassuming nature. At first glance, nobody would expect you to be a killer. You start the trial with the undetectable condition. This condition lasts until you first hit a survivor with a basic attack or a special attack. Additionally, whenever you are undetectable and a survivor would see your aura otherwise, you instead see their aura for 4, 5, 6 seconds. I think this perk narratively fits the aforementioned unassuming presence William would have had before the murders, and due to his general nature in FNaF 3, where at the start of each night and throughout it isn't super easy to tell where Springtrap is at any given time. Plus the feeling that whenever you're watching Springtrap on the cameras, he's watching you back. The second perk is Lure and Capture. Exciting promises go a long way when luring in the gullible. Whenever a generator is completed, one random generator has their aura revealed to survivors for 60 seconds. You see this generator's aura in white. When a survivor interacts with the generator revealed in this way, the survivor becomes exposed for 60 seconds. You also see the survivor's aura for 10, 20, 30 seconds. This perk is meant to reference how William was known for luring children in before going in for the kill. Likewise, it lures survivors in by showing them generator locations and makes them vulnerable once they interact with them. Springtrap's third perk is Scourge Hook Hideaway. Even if you're caught for your crimes, the least you can do is hide the evidence. At the start of the trial, 4 random hooks are changed into Scourge Hooks. You see their auras in white. So long as the survivor is hooked on a Scourge Hook, all survivors gain the blindness status effect. Additionally, when a survivor is unhooked from a Scourge Hook, you gain undetectable for 10, 20, 30 seconds. This perk references how William hid the bodies and likely went into hiding after he was caught. Also, I think Springtrap should definitely have a Scourge Hook perk, as it just generally seems to fit his vibe. Now let's talk about possible Springtrap Cosmetics. I think that its default cosmetic should be his FNaF 3 look, obviously, but what about the weapon? It's interesting to note that in an interview with Behavior's head of partnerships, Matthew Cote, he hints that in the discussions with Scott, the specifics of how the killer will even hit survivors has come up several times. He then deferred to an example of how when developing Sadako, they sat down with the franchise owners and developed something that made sense and essentially became canon in the Rings universe. So to me, this implies Springtrap's weapon will be a bit more inventive, much like Sadako's. I'll play the clip from the interview now.
Everyone expects you to pay as much tribute and hit as much of the lore, but really you're making a PvP game, and that you have to have these characters display all that stuff while running around and hitting people.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but even that, like the specifics of hitting people, like that's come up more than once. And Sadako is a good example of that, right? She doesn't touch anybody. That's what she does, and we had to be creative with this one, and we sat down with the actual people, the creators of this IP, which is absolutely amazing to be able to do that. And we sort of pitched ideas, and they listened, and then they had some inspiration on their side, and we came up with something that was very relevant to the character, and that is now canon to the Sadako universe.
Now, I would still want to point out that physical weapons could still be on the table. They could go with his knife from the movie, or even draw inspiration from the common fan display of Springtrap loading a fire axe. Maybe one he picked up during the fire in FNaF 3, I don't know. But I wanted to share a couple of ideas of some non-physical weapons he could have as well. One idea is that his weapon is a jump scare scream. Now this could even possibly entail that unlike other killers he wouldn't get weapon skins, and instead he'd have cosmetic slots for his head, torso, and legs only. Or they could have the alternate skins be different sound effects and VFX. For example, the prestige weapon could be a distorted sounding scream with VFX that appears as if he's spitting blood at the survivors. I've had another idea for his weapon though, which is why I've still not talked about what Springtrap's lore would look like yet. Namely, I think that Springtrap's DBD lore could tie into Ultimate Custom Night, the entity pulling Afton from that hellscape and into its realm. With it, the vengeful spirit follows, but its rage becomes weaponized by the entity, the spirit itself becoming a weapon to be wielded by Springtrap. I think visually this would look like a floating ghostly wisp that floats around his hand, and when attacking with it, the face of the vengeful spirit appears alongside a screaming noise, somewhat similar to how Sadako's weapon appears. This could open the door for other spirits to be unlockable as weapons, namely the missing children, which would be disturbing and sad, but also kind of awesome. The prestige version of this weapon would probably just turn the wisp red and have the face and the attack animation appear bloodied. If that's a little too disturbing, it could be an animatronic's bloody face like Golden Freddy's. With that aside, other cosmetics could be things like his alternate forms from FNaF AR, or characters like Burntrap or Spring Bunny. But I would definitely want to see a blighted skin for Springtrap. I'll show a design I made myself on screen right now. Honestly, I think skins could be where we eat most with FNaF content, as if our AR taught us anything, it's that Scott doesn't mind dressing his characters up in wacky costumes. Something else I'd like to see, but maybe unlikely, are cosmetic rewards for Springtrap depending on what FNaF games you own on your system. These probably wouldn't be anything more complicated than just recolors, but just to spitball ideas, I suggest brown skin for FNaF 1, white for FNaF 2, a more intense green for FNaF 3, red for 4, blue for Sister Location, and black for Pizzeria Simulator. Alright, now with the characters generally covered, I want to talk about map possibilities. I know maps aren't guaranteed, but for a series called Five Nights at Freddy's, I think it would almost be a disservice to not have a map. Some basic suggestions for maps would be the FNaF 1 Pizzeria or Fazbear Frights. I imagine these maps could be put in the Withered Isle realm, much like how Alien's map and D&D's map went into pre-existing realms. I say Withered Isle given the Greenville Square map already has an 80s, 90s vibe to it, with the movie theater and arcade machines. I imagine the map offering for these maps could just be the Help Wanted newspapers from their respective games, or for Fazbear Frights, the It Burns newspaper from FNaF 3. Another possibility of map I'd like to see is the Atrium from Security Breach. I think this map would have to go in its own realm, namely the Pizzaplex, but as a whole I think the Pizzaplex would have a very unique atmosphere for DBD, and I can imagine plenty of cooler cinematic Easter eggs with it, such as the Security Breach theme playing when the exit gates open. To spook it up and make it less open, they could do a take on how it would have looked during Ruin, given we never actually see it then. Have broken lights and rubble scattered around to make the loops and tiles. For the Pizzaplex, some possible map offerings could be the Vandy Mask or Gregory's Fazwatch. Alright, now I'll go on to some extra flavorful things I'd want to see with the chapter. First off, charms. I think the charm for buying the chapter should be Helpy. Not only does everyone love him, but he's also kind of become the official mascot of the Freddy's brand ever since Pizzeria Simulator. Seeing Helpy dangling from hooks during trials would also be funny. I'd also like there to be some Easter egg charms, like the one that came with the Silent Hill chapter by typing in the Konami code. Maybe typing in 1983 with Springtrap selected on the menu would give you a Fredbear plushie charm. Typing in 395248, the wall code from FNaF 3, could give you an 8-bit Spring Bunny or Fredbear charms. Just a couple of suggestions. Next up, cosmetics for other killers. I've gone through each of the killers and considered whether or not they'd make sense with a FNaF skin, bearing in mind that licensed characters never get skins of other licenses, and powers relying on a distinct object like Billy's Chainsaw probably debunk a character from getting a legendary skin unless the item in question could be reasonably reskinned into something that makes more sense. So far though, we've only seen Houndmaster's dog get a reskin. So bear that in mind, but I did actually end up choosing one for each original killer, so here's some ideas. I know people will call me out if I don't mention it, but Trapper as Freddy Fazbear could be funny. I'm just not sure they'd do it since that would require Freddy Fazbear to be using bear traps. One of the Phantom animatronics could work as Wraith, if it wouldn't be a problem, he has a bell. I don't really see any FNAF characters being given a chainsaw, but Pigpatch could be really funny for Hillbilly. Nightmarion would be a cool skin for Nurse, or the puppet even, although I don't think he'd be a killer. I could see Huntress getting masked based on the characters, but I don't see any FNAF character throwing hatchets or anything. Can't explain why, but although people hate Springtrap, I think he could work for the Hag. It could be weird having William as two different killers, but yeah, it's an idea. Doctor, I think, would be perfect with Glitchtrap. I know people say baby for clown, but I think any FNAF character throwing gas bottles would be weird. Maybe if anything, he could get one of those super old suits the Mimic wears and ruin. That fits Clown's vibe, I think. Hear me out, Shadow Bonnie as the spirit. I don't know if they'd give him a sword or what, but it would be cool. The Legion, I think, could have skins based on the FNAF 4 bullies, with each Legion member getting a different mask. I mean, there's 4 bullies and 4 Legion members. One of the Legion is even named Susie, the name of the spirit that possesses Chica. This one's a little weird, but for Plague, classic Chica could work given Chica tends to be characterized as overeating. Maybe Glamrock Chica, since she's the one we actually see eating in the games. For Oni, one of the Nightmare animatronics could be interesting, like Nightmare Foxy, for example. I don't see any FNAF character wielding a gun, but if I'm to come up with one for Deathslinger, I mean, maybe Captain Foxy since he has a cowboy adventure? For Blood, I could see maybe Classic Foxy or even Grim Foxy. They'd probably just have to remove the serum injection animation, as that may not make a ton of sense for the animatronics. The twins, I think, could have a few possibilities where Victor gets reskinned. Something like Baby and a Biddy Bab, Funtime Freddy and Bon Bon. I think I like the baby idea more though on the account that I want to kick a Biddy Bab. While no FNAF character throws knives, I think one of the Glamrocks could be perfect for Trickster, at least thematically. Maybe Roxy or Chica or something. For Artist, hear me out, Blackbird. I know this character's from the books, but I mean, it's creepy bird. Enough said. Dredge could go a couple ways. One of them would be a focus on the amalgamation theme, in which I think a skin based on Molten Freddy or the Tangle could be cool. Another way it could go could be focusing more on the power, in which I think Nightmare from FNAF 4 would be great for, hiding in the darkness and popping out of closets. I don't know if Knight would really work for any FNAF character, but if they're willing to reskin his guards, one of the Phantoms with some of the other Phantoms as the guards could work. For Skull Merchant, I think a security guard skin, or a Vanny skin, would do. For Singularity, I also think a security guard skin would be cool, maybe replace its head with a security camera. Some of my friends also suggested Mangle or Nightmare Mangle, so that's an idea. For Unknown, I think Ennard would be perfect fit. The UVX could be a little weird, but it could be reflavored to be Remnant or something. And for Houndmaster, I mean, I don't know, what FNAF character has a quadruped companion? Maybe Funtime Freddy with an oversized bonbon? I don't know. I should also mention skins for the original survivors that dress them up as Freddy's employees could be fun. For some achievements, obviously each character would have their own adept challenge, but some others that could be cool is an achievement for Springtrap where you finish the match by killing all 4 survivors inside of an animatronic suit, called the Missing Survivor Incident. Normally chapter achievements tend to revolve around perks that released with that chapter, so maybe one for survivors that involves shining flashlights for a certain amount of time, and per killer an achievement which revolves around giving survivors a blindness condition for a certain amount of time. Oh, and there'd also be achievements for completing a key generator in a given FNAF map. Finally, I wanted to wrap this up with the discussion of a potential tome for the FNAF chapter. For those who don't know, tomes in DBD are seasonal collections of challenges and rewards, some of the rewards being added lore to the characters of interest. I don't know if they'd be able to do this since Scott is so protective of FNAF lore, but if they did, I honestly think it would be cool to have a tome that, for Mike and Springtrap, focuses on their respective time between FNAF 3 and FNAF 6, roaming around as local cryptids. Nothing lore-shattering, but could have chances of some interesting storytelling. A skin for Michael in the tome that turns in purple could be awesome. For Springtrap, a skin similar to the Pig's Tome skin that takes him out of his rabbit costume or turns him to his human form could be interesting. Maybe give him a dapper yellow and purple outfit. For Vanessa, the Tome story could just add maybe more context to her struggle against Glitch Trap in her head. A Tome skin that puts her in the Vanny costume could be cool, but could also be confusing. In general, survivors getting full face masks is weird, but hey, the most recent survivor got one on launch. And I think I've covered just about everything. If you have any extra questions about any of my thoughts, or have ideas of your own, feel free to leave them in the comments. Would love to see what all of you are coming up with. Let me know what you think of my ideas, namely the perks and Springtrap's power, and yeah, that covers it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.